Good morning. Thank you for coming out this morning. Welcome to our class on fall blooming plants. I'm going to focus today on plants that will extend your color season further into the fall. So hopefully you know that we also do landscape services and organic garden maintenance. If you're interested in those things, we can help you. So please see me after the talk if you're interested in that. And I will go ahead and get started. How many of you are doing this just because you love pollinators and you want to provide stuff for pollinators? Okay, most of you. And then how many of you also want to just have more color, more of the year? Pretty much everybody, same thing. Me too. That's what I like. And Texas is a little tricky, as we all know, to get things to keep on going through hurricanes and droughts and all the floods and whatever we get here. But I'm going to start by talking about ones that bloom primarily in the fall, and then I'm going to talk about ones that bloom kind of spring, summer, fall. And then I'll also talk about some native, non-native adapted plants that also do well in our landscapes here and will give you some more fall color. So today I'm going to start with the fall aster, which is right in front of me. The fall aster is called fall aster because that is when it blooms. It only blooms in the fall. And the ones that you see, if you have a lawn, you're probably annoyed by the fact that you have these weeds that come up that have little daisy-like flowers on them. That is actually the true native aster. And we have some growing out in front of our building near the sign out there. That's what the weed looks like if you don't pull it out and let it go. It grows into a small shrub with lots of little flowers on it, but it's not very showy. The wild one is not very showy, and you don't want it in your lawn. And that's where it usually comes up, is in your lawn, so you end up pulling them out. But the hybridized versions, and everything we grow today in our gardens is hybridized. There are very few plants that we sell in the nursery that are true natives that have never been altered in any way. What we don't sell are GMO products. It's against the law for us to sell anything that's genetically modified, so you don't need to worry about that. But everything has been hybridized over hundreds and even thousands of years for them to either taste better or look better or provide some other benefit, medicinal or culinary, whatever. But the fall aster is a true fall bloomer, and this particular one is, I'm not sure I can pronounce this myself, Symphyotrichum oblongifolium is the botanical name. And it's going to be a fairly bushy, small bush that grows to be about 2 to 3 feet high and about the same width. And this one is much more compact than some of the other fall aster varieties that we sell. But that's good because that means you get, more dense foliage, which also gives you denser blooms. So it looks really spectacular. It's budding right now, and it should start blooming. I'm sorry? The blooms are, depending on the variety, the bloom colors are either anything from white with a yellow center to lavender, different shades of lavender. So there are quite a few different varieties of it, but that's basically the range that they fall in is white to lavender. And this one here is called October Skies, is the specific varietal name of this particular one. This one is a white one with yellow centers. So this is one of my favorite plants. We have one planted right out in front here of right in front of our greenhouse, in the little strip there as you're walking along the sidewalk there. And when it's in bloom, it's going to be just a mass of blooms. You won't even be able to see the foliage because there will be so many blooms on it, which is one of the reasons everybody loves it. Another one that's a pretty reliable fall bloomer here. Here we are, right next to me. The fragrant mist flower is another one that blooms only in the fall. And this is going to be a much bigger plant than the Aster. You can prune it to kind of, make it bushier when they're in these pots like this and they've been in the pot for a long time. They don't have any way to grow except up. So plants tend to be more vertical looking than they might be in the landscape. But fragrant mist flower is a perennial shrub and going to attract a lot of different kinds of pollinators. It has a white bloom. There's also one called Greg's mist flower, which is very similar. I don't have that in stock right now, but that one has more lavender bluish flowers. But otherwise it looks very similar to this one. But it's also called a shrubby boneset, and thoroughwort is another common name. I don't know if you've heard of those common names. Most plants have a lot of different common names, so that can be confusing if you're not familiar with the most common ones. But this is native to the Edwards Plateau, so high desert, dry, drought tolerant plant. Doesn't need, that's one of the great things about all these plants I'm going to be talking about, is your Texas natives in general are going to be much lower maintenance than any kind of fancy schmancy exotic plant that you can put in your yard. They're adapted to our climate, they're adapted to our pests, they're adapted to our diseases, and so you have very little trouble with them, including this one. It's going to be very, very hardy. It's going to overwinter well. It's going to not require a lot of fertilization or watering or pruning or any of those kinds of things. If you prune it, it's going to be mainly for, just making it bushier and flower more. The plant gets to be, in our area, they say it gets to be about 3 feet by 3 feet. In other parts of the country, it can get a lot bigger. So you may see pictures of it as a great big shrub, in somebody's landscape. That's because they're not here in Texas. So for our purposes, it's about 3 feet by 3 feet. But it's deciduous, so it's not an evergreen. It's going to lose its foliage and its blooms after the first frost, but it will come back in the spring, just like your other perennials will. And if we have a mild winter, then it may stay evergreen. It just depends on what kind of winter we have. And that's going to be true for most of these plants. If we have another -2 week, like we did a couple of years ago, you're going to be more likely to lose plants than if we have a milder 50-degree winter. So just keep that in mind. But it blooms in the fall. It's got fuzzy white flowers on it. I do have pictures, but since I'm not doing a slideshow, I can't show you the pictures. So if you like to see them, I can pull those out for you after the class. It also produces fruit after the flowers are gone from it. Kind of like your American Beauty Berry, it will produce fruit that the birds really love. So if you're a bird watcher, bird lover, this is a great plant for them. as well as for your other pollinators. So, and it blooms in it prefers full sun, but it will grow in some shade. When we talk about full sun in Texas, I always need to clarify. Full sun means that it gets 6 hours or more of direct sunlight. So it doesn't need to be in a place where it gets, you know, that brutal 12-hour western sun. Nobody really likes that, including Texas natives. You know, we all want some shade in the afternoon. So full sun means 6 hours or more. So if you put this in a place where it got 6 hours of sun and 4 hours of shade, it would be thrilled, especially if it was getting afternoon shade, because that's the hottest part of the day. And that's when most of us start to wilt. You know, and it's going to bloom more profusely too if it gets more sun. Again, it's adapted to our soil, very low maintenance, no pest problems to speak of. So another great low maintenance plant. What you don't want to do is cut it back too much. You can cut it back in the early spring when it's, you know, before it starts to bush out again. But what you don't want to do is keep shearing off the blooms, because that's just going to defeat the whole purpose of having the plant. If you want it for the pollinators, you want it to go ahead and flower. So you can deadhead the dead ones, but you don't want to just shear the whole plant while it's in bloom. And so that'll just give you, you know, a much better show when it's in season. Some people use this one as a substitute for garden chrysanthemums. So it can work very well. If you really like chrysanthemums, this might be an alternative, because our chrysanthemums don't usually overwinter here very well. A lot of your native grasses bloom in the fall. And when I say bloom, it's a little bit different, because they don't produce flowers like the fragrant mist flower or like this guy here. But they do produce seed heads. So they're more like plumes that you see on like the pampas grass. We have some pampas grass out there. It's got a little seed head on top. That looks white. A lot of your native grasses will produce those seed heads, and those seed heads will have a different color from the base of the plant. So, and some of them come in really beautiful colors. Some of them are white. Other ones are really pink. The pink muley grass is a really beautiful native grass that gets to be about, it stays relatively small. Some of your other grasses get pretty big, but the muley grass is one that stays like 1 to 3 feet. But in the fall, it goes crazy with these purple seed heads that sort of wave with the breeze in the landscape. And I have to say, when I first moved here, I was not a fan of native grasses. I thought, you know, why would you want to plant more grass? You already have lawn. Why do you need grass? But now that I've had a chance to really work with them and see them in the landscape and stuff, I think they really add a lot of interest to your garden. And those seed heads do provide food for the birds. They eat the seeds. The pollinators will also pollinate them. So again, another good forage plant for your garden, and one that doesn't get too big. So if you have a smaller yard, you can still work with something like that. So the next one, let's see, is the Mexican mint marigold. It's not in bloom yet, because again, it's a fall bloomer and we're just now getting into fall. So these are going to be things that bloom like October, November, you know, rather than August. So we're still kind of warm for some of them. Like I said, a lot of them are budding right now, like the fall aster. But the Mexican mint marigold is a great plant for Texas. It's actually native to the Southwest, northern Mexico. It's some people use it as a substitute for tarragon. It tastes very similar to tarragon, and tarragon doesn't grow well here. Yeah.
Did you say Mexican mint marigold?
Yes.
So can you use it like you do other marigolds, like a companion plant that?
It's really, it grows differently. It's not marigolds are annuals basically, but marigolds are a great plant for a fall garden. They are going to give you similar looking flowers, but it's more of a bush, whereas marigolds are more like individual plants with, tops, flower tops on them, lots of little plants versus one bigger bush. But again, it tolerates growing in a container. In fact, a lot of people prefer to grow it in the container because it doesn't really like the heat all that well. It's not, it takes sun, but it doesn't like the really hot August, 100-degree weather. So a lot of people keep it in a container and then move it into the shade. But yes, it does have, at least for some people, tastes like anise is another thing. Some people get that taste from it, anise or licorice. But primarily it's used as a tarragon substitute. It's got bright yellow flowers that look similar to the marigold. It has a little dark center. The flowers have a little dark center to them. And they attract butterflies as well as other pollinators, so it's a great butterfly plant. By the way, I will be talking about milkweed too later, but most of your butterflies will nectar on just about any kind of flowering plant. When they say a monarch has to have milkweed, it's because that's the one they lay their eggs on. But the adults will nectar on any of these plants. So it's great to have, in fact, they don't nectar on the milkweed plant. Because they want to save that for their babies. They don't want to interfere with the plant producing flowers or anything like that. Other insects will pollinate the milkweeds, but the monarchs do not, which I think is kind of interesting since they're so dependent on it. But it's Mexican mint marigold is another perennial that blooms in the fall. It gets to be about 2 feet by 2 feet, so not real big, which is why you can grow it in a container. It likes moister soil than some of your other Texas natives, so it would need some more water, especially if it's in a container. You need to water your containers more often than you do plants that are in the ground, just generally speaking. It loves, it loves birds. Birds love it, I should say. It will take a lot more shade than some of your other plants. Let's see, dies back to the roots, but it will reseed. So if you let the seeds drop, or if you harvest the seeds and then plant them somewhere else in your garden, you'll get lots of Mexican mint marigold. It reseeds very well. You can also propagate it by rhizomes by splitting the roots and dividing it like that. That's the Mexican mint marigold. And another one is the firebush. This is the firebush. And the neat thing about the firebush is that it's the foliage that turns color rather than the blooms. It's actually done blooming. And so it's got some dead heads on here that won't hurt the plant. But this foliage is going to turn like a burgundy orangish color in the next few weeks. So it says red it depends on your definition of red. The blooms are red. There's still a couple of blooms on here. They're kind of a burnt orange, really, to my eye. People see color differently too. So it may look red to you and orange to someone else, but it's native to the very southern part of the U.S. So Florida, Houston, along the Gulf Coast, those areas. Firebush is more of a tropical plant, so it may or may not do as well here in our winters as it would in those locales. But you can see the leaves. They're already starting to turn color, but they also have interesting leaves because the leaves are not just a solid green. They have an edge around them, and then they also have veins that stand out. So that's one of the things that makes it interesting. This is a great hummingbird plant. So if you like hummingbirds, this is a great one to have. It will also attract other pollinators, of course. But here it's going to be about 3 to 4 feet tall, something like that. It would make a great hedge. If you were looking for a hedge, you can plant several in a row and make a hedge out of it. Actually, it says here it goes as far south as Argentina. It's labeled as a firebush, but it's also called a hummingbird bush because of the hummingbirds. Some people also call it scarlet bush. The ancient Mayans called it Ixcanana, I think, Canaan, sorry, which in Mayan means guardian of the forest, which is kind of interesting. Not sure why they named it that, but it's a very long living perennial, so it will go bare in the winter here. In Florida it'll be evergreen, but here it'll be deciduous. Oh, this is another one that produces fruit. So it's great for the birds. Again, if you like to feed the birds, they would really like this plant, as well as the hummingbirds. The hummingbirds like it because it's got tube-shaped flowers. They like anything that's kind of a trumpet or tube-shaped or bell-shaped flower. So that's why they're drawn to this. They also, red is their favorite color, and it has the red blooms. So it's another one that's easy to propagate from either the seeds of the plant or from the rhizomes. So the next group I want to talk about are some of our natives that bloom for longer periods of time, that start blooming earlier in the year. So salvia is a really large family of Texas natives, and one of the most common ones is the autumn sage, also called Salvia greggii. This is the cherry-colored Salvia greggii, but the autumn sage comes in a whole bunch of different colors. So you get basically the same shape and size, but you can choose from probably 20 or 30 different colors of blooms. This one, the cherry one, is, like I said, one of the most popular. It's solid red. Bees, butterflies, hummingbirds all love it. There's one that's very popular called Hot Lips, which is the same red, but with the top part is red. Top part of the flower here is red. The lower part is white. And so they call it Hot Lips. So I thought that was a pretty cool name. But so you can get them with a solid color, anywhere from white to red to purple to pink. And then they also have the duotone blooms where you can get, a color plus white or something like that. So it's a very versatile plant. it's again about 3 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet tall by 3 to 4 feet wide, and it's going to start blooming as soon as the weather starts to warm up in the spring, and it's going to keep blooming until first frost. Basically, it's going to just keep on blooming its little heart out until it just gets too cold for it. So when the frost comes, it'll die back to the roots because it's a perennial, and then it'll come back in the spring. And each spring you're going to want to cut off any of the dead stuff. So
did you say it would die back to the ground?
Yes, it'll die back to the ground. Usually what happens is you're left with some dead foliage on the top. So it's not completely bare, but it doesn't look great either to have a lot of dead foliage on there. But you don't want to cut it in the middle of winter. Because cutting it is going to encourage it to start to regrow. And you don't want it to start regrowing until we're further into the, or past the real cold weather. So like maybe February, would be a good time usually to cut it back to the ground and then let it flush out again. The other thing you might want to do is if we have a really hot summer, sometimes they can start to look kind of raggedy in like July, August. And so what you can do is like the end of August, shear it back, and that will encourage new growth. And so it'll flush out again. And that's going to be true for all of your salvias. You can do that with pretty much any of them. So this is a great one. Right now I only have the red, but again, it comes in a lot of different colors. So that's a good one. Another kind of salvia that we have is this one here. This one is is a hybrid. So it doesn't have a fancy botanical name, but it's proven winners, and it's called Unplugged Pink. So that's the proven winners is the grower, and they've patented this particular variety of salvia and given it the name Unplugged. Yes, ma'am.
There are annual salvias, correct?
Yes, yes.
And are most of those blue? I mean,
Most of them, they're usually, the ones that we get are usually the blue and the red.
and those are
The annual ones, yeah. They're just not as hardy, so they don't overwinter. So people grow them as an annual flower, just in, like just for the color for the season. But this one is going to be another perennial, and it grows a little bit differently. It's still going to be a bush, but according to the designers, it's going to be a little more vertical, about 3 feet high, but only maybe 2 feet wide. So a little more upright than the autumn sage. And then it says plant them about 15 inches apart, so pretty close together. It doesn't get real tall, so you could use it as a border if you had a relatively high border. So that's a good one for that. Again, the tube-shaped flowers are loved by the hummingbirds as well as your other pollinators. So like I said, salvias are a really huge family of plants, and we usually have a lot of different kinds out there, and this is just a couple of them. One that I've grown in my garden is called Victoria Blue, or actually black and blue salvia. They're very similar looking, and it grows much more vertically than either of these. The plant, each plant is only maybe a foot wide, but it gets to be 3 to 4 feet tall, and it's got the flowers on the ends, and it's another one the hummingbirds love. But it's very shade tolerant and very moisture tolerant. compared to some of the other salvias. I think it's because of the color. I'm not really sure why, but that's my experience with that one. But so your salvias are you can almost do a whole landscape with nothing but salvias because there's so many different kinds, shapes, and colors. But that's just a couple. Over there, the spiky one is a yucca. Right now, yuccas are extremely popular in the landscape, especially the red yuccas. And the red ones and the white ones, the foliage looks the same. The only difference is the bloom color. So it's also very pokey. But this one is called Blue Sentry. And that just means the foliage is going to be sort of a bluish green as opposed to a grayish green or a green. But the flower colors are going to be, it doesn't even say what the flower color is on this one. But it should be a red one. That's usually what we have in stock. Big, tall spikes. So the foliage part of the plant is only going to be maybe 2 feet high and spread out. It'll keep spreading. It'll probably be 4 feet across when it's fully mature. But very low, and then the spikes will shoot up like 5 to 6 feet. So they can be really tall. If they get heavy, they'll kind of bend over, but you know, if you straightened them up, they would be close, your plant would be close to 6 feet tall, and it blooms really profusely in the fall. So you'd have 6 or 8 spikes on each plant with these huge blooms up and down the stem. So you wouldn't just have one flower on the end. You'd have kind of like with the salvias, you get several flowers on one stem. So a lot of people really love this one. But since it's a yucca, it's a desert plant, so it's great for a xeriscape. Nothing bothers it. The flowers do attract some pollinators, but the foliage is pokey, and you know, the animals don't really want to get too close to it, and it's very disease resistant, you know, super drought tolerant, all that kind of good stuff. So it's great for a desert scape or even just a low maintenance garden. It does need loose soil with really good drainage. So you don't want to plant it next to something that needs a lot of water, because you'll drown it and rot it. So you need to just, you know, plant like plants together. That's kind of, you know, a general rule of gardening. If you know, especially when it comes to soil, when you're deciding where to plant something, put all your moisture-loving plants in the same area, and then put all your drought-tolerant plants in another area, so that you're not bringing in problems by overwatering or underwatering. But this one will bloom basically February through October, and actually the stalks can get to be as tall as 9 feet, but usually they're around 5 or 6. So full sun, like I said, it's a drought tolerant type of plant. The blooms can be kind of a light, anything from light pink to almost a maroon color, depending on the variety, and you know what kind of fertilizing you're giving it and stuff like that. So that's another great one. Next one is a really fun one. They brought 2 of these and then didn't bring the other one. This is a chili Pequin. This one is called chili Pequin. This is the only native pepper to North America. All of your other peppers come from Asia primarily. But this one is native to Central America, pretty much. This is the one the Incas used to put in their chocolate. So it makes lots and lots and lots of these little tiny berries that start off green and then turn red. and it's going to pump those out for you from May to October, pretty much. It's still flowering, plus it's got lots of little baby fruits on here. They don't get very big, but they are edible. You can make salsa out of them. They're totally fine for that. They're a full sun plant. They do prefer moist soil, so you could put this over there with your other moist soil plants. And they will propagate from seed if you want to do that, or you can split the rhizome and grow them from the root. Either way. But they're really beautiful when you have a mass of them together and you've got all those red berries on them, rather than having just one standalone. They tend to look better if you have a grouping. Let's see, another native is the swamp milkweed, which I said I was going to talk about. Your other milkweeds are a lot smaller, but this one gets really big. This is another moisture-loving plant. So again, for your moisture-loving plants, this would go well with those, to put this in the same area. This one grows like along the edges of Grapevine Lake and places like that, where not in the water, it's not a water plant, but near the water's edge where the soil is going to be continuously moist. So that's the kind of an environment that it likes. It's native to a large area of the eastern United States, and it produces beautiful rose-colored blooms that look similar to some of the other milkweed plants, but the color is different. This is one of the few milkweeds that likes the moisture soil. So it's great if you're trying to help the monarchs and you want to have milkweed plants. It's nice to have an assortment, rather than for a long time people were just planting the tropical milkweed, and that's not native to our part of Texas. It's more of a South Texas, Central America type plant, and it was just limiting the diversity. The monarchs need diversity, just even within the milkweed family. It's helpful for them to have more diversity. So planting different types of milkweed in your garden is preferable to having just one type. But one thing about all milkweeds, and you'll see this one if you look closely, you'll see the stems look yellow. Those are aphids. And every milkweed plant I've ever seen is always covered in aphids. But the butterflies don't seem to care. So, I spent a lot of time for the first few years trying to get rid of the aphids on my milkweed, and then I decided I didn't have time for it. And the plant did just as well when I ignored it as it did when I was trying to take care of it and get rid of all the little yucky aphids on there. It's, even though it's covered in these things, I would recommend that you just leave them alone, because the caterpillars don't care. They just are going to go ahead and munch away on the leaves anyway. So it's a lot hardier. This one can get to be about 4 feet tall. Again, it needs moist soil, but it still wants full sun. So, and again, afternoon shade is fine. If you can give it some shade, or even in the middle of the day, if you can give it some sun in the morning and then sun in the afternoon with some shade in between, it'll do fine in that kind of an environment. It likes mucky clay, so it's a perfect plant for this area. It propagates from seed, but you can, since it's a perennial, this is a perennial variety, not all of them are, the plant can be divided at the rhizome. It attracts hummingbirds, it attracts butterflies, obviously. It attracts both the monarch and another type of butterfly called the queen butterfly. So, and they look very similar to each other. So if you see butterflies nectaring on it, it's probably the queen butterfly, because the monarch butterfly doesn't nectar on its own milkweed plants. My advice is don't put anything on this plant, not even a beneficial insect, because the beneficial insects will eat the monarch eggs and monarch larvae. The swamp milkweed is just one of several milkweeds that are native to this climate. So the common milkweed, the green antelope horn milkweed, there's about 5 or 6 altogether that are actually native to Texas. And then there are a bunch of other ones that are native to either further north or further south. And then last but not least, I do want to talk about some plants that are non-native, because even though they're not natives, they are very well adapted to our climate here. And they look beautiful in the fall landscape. The first one is talk about pokey, the charity Mahonia plant. This is a type of leatherleaf Mahonia. It's got very prickly leaves like a holly. But in the fall, it gets pretty wide, but not real tall. And on top of it, it's going to have these big flower spikes that are like sprays of yellow. Again, and then after it blooms, it will produce berries that the birds really love. And so that's another good one for bird lovers. And it is kind of prickly, so you might want to be careful that you're not planting it where people are walking by all the time. This is actually an evergreen, so the foliage is going to stay green all year round. But you'll see that cycle of blooms and then berries in the fall season. It makes a great focal point in your landscape, and it's going to be, when it's mature, it'll get up to about 5 feet tall. So, and that would include the spikes on it. Another non-native that blooms in the fall but still works very well here is this is a sedum, a succulent called Frosted Fire. And you can see it's getting ready to bloom right now. It's got lots and lots of little flowers on it, budding out here. But it's even though it's not a native, since it's a succulent, it does really well in a xeriscape. Has variegated leaves with sort of a light green with a creamy edge around them, creamy edging that gives a little bit of interest to the foliage. And then you'll get a beautiful flower head of white flowers in the fall when these start to open up. You'll get big clumps of white blooms on here. It says about 16 inches by 16 inches, so 1.5 feet so in size when it's in bloom. These are a fun one to have in a xeriscape because they do give you lots of fall interest. And yes, it is like that. Yes, it grows the same way. It's actually, it says it's more similar, I guess, to one called Autumn Fire, but it's the same idea, same family. This one is called Bluebeard, which is kind of weird because they're not blue. There's nothing blue about it. But it's also called Caryopteris. It grows similarly to the American beautyberry, which is a great plant to have, but I don't have any to show you. The flowers are different from the American beautyberry. They're more fuzzy. This one is just starting to bloom now. It's got lots and lots of buds on it, and then it's also got some open flowers here. Very fragrant, so it smells great when you walk by it. It's stays green up until, well, really, up until first frost. It is deciduous, but so it will die back to the ground. It'll leave sticks. You know, the stems will still be there, so you'll have to cut those off in the spring. But it's a great plant to have in your yard for the birds as well as the bees and butterflies. They recommend that you pair it with rudbeckia, so that makes a really good companion plant for this one. But it's going to be, what did I say, about 3 feet high and not quite as wide, about 24 inches wide. Deer resistant, which does anybody still have deer around here? I think they've all been run over by cars by now. Probably aren't too many left. But tons of blooms all through the fall. So it can be perennial or deciduous, it can be evergreen or deciduous if we have a mild winter, like a lot of these plants. But I don't know why it's called Bluebeard. I'm kind of mystified by that name, because it's so pink. But anyway, it's very beautiful blooms, and this particular one is called Pavilion Pink. This the particular variety that we have in stock right now. But if you like the American Beauty Berry, then this would be another similar one that would look great in the fall. And the American Beauty Berry is native, whereas this one is not. So that's another difference. Then another one that's not native but does super, super well here, and everybody loves it. All the pollinators love this one. This is one that can be evergreen if we get a mild winter, but this is an Abelia. There are a bunch of different kinds of Abelias. I have a couple of other ones down there that are different varieties. They can be anywhere from about 2.5, 3 feet high, all the way up to about 6 feet, depending on the variety. Some are more compact, like the one with the solid white flowers down there is called Twisted Lime. It's got variegated leaves and then the white blooms, but it's smaller and much more compact than this one. This one is I want to say it's a grandifloral. Oh, this is a Rose Creek. And the Rose Creek is going to be 3 to 4 feet high and wide. And it's got the pinker blooms that turn white as they open, whereas that one is all white all the time. And this one they're all very fragrant. They're all very, very fragrant. They're so well adapted to this area, they might as well be a native. They are part of the honeysuckle family. They're a member of that. And drought tolerant, no pests, no maintenance, just plant it and get it established, and then you can pretty much forget about it.
Is it just pretty much a fall blooming plant?
No, this one will bloom spring through fall. It's a true pollinator magnet, because it does bloom so long. It'll start blooming usually in by April it'll be blooming, and it'll keep on blooming until frost, basically. So anywhere from 9 to 11 months out of the year, it's going to be in bloom, and it's going to be covered in bumblebees and honeybees and butterflies and all kinds of other pollinating insects all of the time. And you can, depending on the variety, you may want to shape it, but you don't want to really cut it back too much, because again, these are the flowers appear on the new growth. So if you're always cutting, you're not ever going to get any flowers. So, and then each time you cut, you're going to get, this part is going to get thicker and more dense. So you're going to have more wood and fewer flowers. over time if you keep doing that. But you know, once or twice a year, like if you shear it in August so it flushes back out in the fall, something like that, that's okay, but you don't want to keep cutting the flowers off. These are a little bit smaller. The big one is called grandiflora, and that one gets to be a good 6 feet, 7 feet tall. And it's sort of intends to grow kind of like this one, how it's got the stems coming out with the flowers on the ends, and then it sort of bends over. That's how the glossy Abelia, the grandifloral, grows. And again, you want to not cut off those blooms, so you want to allow it to kind of grow into its natural shape and produce all of those beautiful flowers, because that's what's going to give you the pollinators. The bigger ones are great for screen. If you want to have a screen to screen off your neighbor's yard or something like that, you can plant several in a row and make them into a hedge. You just don't want to be shearing them all the time. It's a full sun plant. It will take some shade. Again, 6 hours of sun is what it needs. And then it's very drought tolerant, so you know, you want to get your plants established. So when you first plant them, you're going to have to water them more frequently, but a plant like that's going to be able to go for probably a month without water. I mean, it's not going to be real happy about it, but it'll be okay. You know, if you go on vacation and your sprinklers quit working, it'll still be there when you come back. Whereas, you know, some of the other plants might not. It's very, very hardy, and just very versatile, because you get the different foliage colors, you get the different flower colors, different shapes and sizes. So it's kind of like the salvia family. There's a lot of choices within the family of what kind of a look you want. And I'm going to talk about the Catmint. It's another one that's technically it's not native, and this one has blue flowers. The Catmint is different than catnip. Catmint, though, is loved by cats, which is why it has that name. They have a similar effect on cats. But you get a very aromatic foliage with it. So it's an herb. So it's very aromatic. It's native to Central Asia, so Turkey, Iran, that area of the world. This particular variety is called Walker's Low Catmint, and it's a full sun plant. It says blue to purple flower spikes that sprout forth from late spring to early fall, and it's a sun-loving perennial. The gray-green foliage gives you a nice contrast. It's the foliage is, I'm not sure what you'd call the leaves are not smooth. They're more rough, but you get a nice contrast with some of your other evergreens, and then you get the beautiful flower spikes that are blue. It looks, when it's blooming, it looks kind of like a salvia greggii as far as the way it blooms, with the flower spikes coming up and the flowers along the stem. Very drought tolerant, because it shouldn't, once it's established, it shouldn't need very much water, no more than once a week. Even in the summer, you shouldn't need to water it more than once a week. Definitely want to let it dry out between waterings. So if it's not doing well, that might be the reason. The only thing you really need to do is deadhead this. It's gonna stop growing when it gets to be about 3 feet by 3 feet. But you're gonna get those blooms all the way from again, spring through summer through fall, and it attracts hummingbirds and butterflies. Sort of a periwinkle blue flower on this one. There's a picture on the plant here. If you want to see the flower color, you can come up and check it out. But it's a periwinkle blue, sort of. Some of the other varieties are more toward the lavender spectrum, and makes a great border or an edge type plant. So that's one. I've got one left I want to just quickly talk about. But the goji berries, which are these here, they have thorns on them. So again, not something you want to plant next to your front door. It's got berries similar to the chili Pequin. They're little teeny tiny red berries that are edible. It's got a lot of medicinal uses. I'm not even sure what they all are. That would be a question for Marilyn when she's here in October. Purple blooms, little tiny purple flowers that you can see on this one that are followed by the berries. This one's got a little berry that's still green here, but that one's got the red ones on it. And another one that's not native but well adapted to our soil. It's drought tolerant. It's considered to be, the berries are considered to be a superfood. There's a berry right there, a bunch of berries. Supposed to help with cancer. Not sure what else. They're very nutritious as well. Just a lot of vitamins and stuff in them. They can be grown from seed or from the plant, from cuttings from the plant, and they like hot, dry weather. So another good, ought to be a Texas native, but isn't kind of a plant. Yes. Oh, my bad for not talking about this one. This is a variety of beauty berry, and it's called Pearl Glam is the particular varietal name. Again, that's a hybrid that was developed by proven winners. This is just a spectacular fall plant. The foliage will turn purple, and then it will also produce these beautiful sort of magenta colored flowers, or well, first it produces flowers. I'm sorry, it's already produced its flowers, and then it will be followed, the flowers are followed by these magenta berries. So if you've ever seen an American beauty berry while it's fruiting, it's got huge clusters of berries, really jam-packed close together. And the berries can be white or pink. Because this is a hybrid, you get a deeper pink than you do with the native beauty berry. And you also get the benefit of this dark purple foliage that it's going to turn to when the weather cools off. And so this is just a really awesome one to have in your yard. Of course, the birds love the berries. How big? This one is going to be 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. So, and then it will sort of, bend over again as the stems get longer. It'll tend to bend over, but it's pretty erect right now, and in the picture it looks pretty erect. So another really great one to have in the garden, and so beautiful. I wish it was already turned color so you could see how beautiful the foliage is, but the berries are going to look like the ones on the other beauty berry plants. Okay, well, I guess that's it then, and thank you very much for coming today. I really appreciate your time.